Hey, it's Chris here. In this video, I want to talk about lessons that we can learn from hospice caregivers that could help us reduce or at least address online radicalization. It seems like we've had a string of them, and objectively, it is increasing the number of young people, mostly young men, who are going online and being radicalized to the point that they will obtain a firearm and engage in a mass shooting. And I think for every one person that actually carries out that mass shooting, there are probably hundreds of others that are primed to engage in a mass shooting or a mass act of violence. And oftentimes we see our politicians trying to identify were they left or were they right. Well, I think the real issue, one, is what's leading to the radicalization, or who is doing the radicalizing. And then secondly, how are they doing it? And then third, I want to just spend a moment to talk about what we can learn from hospice caregivers. Now, if you read the literature from security officials, there are a lot of bad actors out there that are either directly or indirectly contributing to radicalization. You've got countries like Russia and China and North Korea that are actively working to radicalize young people here in the United States and take advantage of their vulnerabilities. Now, they do this not to try to get somebody to embrace one political ideology on the left or the right, because what they want to do is they want to create destabilization, and they want to take advantage of the weaknesses of our young men and women who are online and stir them up in one direction or another. The issue isn't getting them to take a political side, but a mass shooter on the right or a mass shooter on the left will both equally inflict damage and inflame polarization in our country and destabilize society. I think a good one to read for me from a Christian perspective was a book by Elizabeth Newman called Kingdom of Rage. So it might be good if you're really interested in this to look that up, particularly how the radicalization in the Christian community is taking place. Because objectively, multiple sources have found that 75% of the radicals who engage in these mass acts of violence have been bred in right-wing incubators as opposed to left-wing incubators. But I think both incubators are going. It's just that people on the right have more propensity to start acting out violently, and we need to think about that. So what these groups do is they take advantage of vulnerabilities that our young people have. For example, isolation and loneliness. A lot of these young men and women, mostly men, were severely damaged by COVID and pulling back from social structures and being alone and spending most of their time online and on online communities. And so they are isolated. There is a huge level of loneliness that we see in our society. It's an epidemic. But when you're younger, it's often harder to process that loneliness and do something constructive about it. And when you're younger, you feel that that's the way it's always going to be. We've spent a lot of time lying to our children, telling them that you can be whatever you want to be, that the sky is the limit. Well, the limits are your abilities and your talents. And I remember one young person my wife and I were involved in her life many years ago when she was in high school. She said that she wanted to be a physician when she grew up, and we wanted to encourage that for her. But she could not pass a math class. She couldn't pass science class. Even with tutoring help, she really struggled to do well in school. And so being unable to grasp and understand basic math and science in high school was going to be a block to being a physician. And continuing to tell her, you're going to be a physician, you can be anything you want to be, and yet coming up with the roadblock of her abilities it can be very crushing to a young person. Because basically, instead of helping them find something that they're good at and encouraging them to find something that they're good at and feed that and help them feel good about whatever they can do, we tell them they can do anything, and then they just face this crushing self-defeat. And then they just feel like they're not worth anything. So if you're isolated and lonely, and then you're not measuring up to be whatever you want to be, and then you begin to feel really crushed and broken, and you're in those early adolescent years, and you're trying to figure life out. So you're very emotionally, your emotions are developing. You're learning how to regulate your emotions, and so then you have somebody that seems to be able to reach out and give you this sense of belonging, give you this sense of community, to touch your emotions and make you feel felt and validated, and stirring up some of your frustrations and your anger and your bitterness towards society that you feel is letting you down because you aren't happy, because you aren't doing what you want to do, and you feel all these roadblocks. And then they begin to manipulate you with narratives and community. It's because of X, Y, and Z. It's because of this. It's because of the political structure. It's because of the religious structure. It's because of the economic structure. Well, the reason why you're not happy, the reason why you feel so bad inside and are so lonely and so isolated, and you don't really have a purpose or meaning and belonging in your life because you haven't found your thing to do, because people don't want you to find meaning. The system is against you, and you've got to fight the system. And then when you're online, when most of the people that you're actually in connection to in your life as a teenager, you're at odds with, or you're at disinterested parents, schools that don't seem to care too much about you, and you feel all these feelings of anger and bitterness, and nobody seems to care. Nobody seems to understand you. Nobody is connecting with you that you know personally. You get further drawn in to these online communities, and that anger, that bitterness, and that rage just continue to grow and develop, and you don't have anybody showing you a different way. And so you some end up snapping, and they end up engaging in acts of violence. They're radicalized by this online belief system. So what is it about hospice caregivers? As I was thinking about it, what is about some of the innate traits of those who are drawn to be the caregivers for a terminally ill loved one or friend? What is it about what I've noticed in their lives over the years that could help us to deal with these young people that are being radicalized online, that are being poisoned, being turned into destructive tornadoes in our society to tear things apart? How do we fight back against those people in the background on the internet that are radicalizing them and turning them into people full of bitterness and rage and hatred and stirring up thoughts of mass violence? Well, there's several things that I noticed about hospice caregivers. One is that the ones that end up taking care of loved ones have this big heart for mercy and empathy, and they're not trying to fix a loved one. They're just trying to take care of them. They are ones that are willing to listen to the pain, all the doubts, all the things that go in with processing a terminal illness, particularly if somebody's more aware of what's going on. There's others who are in the sunset of their life that have one of the dementias, and they're not necessarily self-aware, but they still are expressing feelings. And hospice caregivers are just able to take all that in and just accept that challenge and just listen and show empathy and compassion. And that's one of the first traits is these people that of hospice caregivers that are empathetic and compassionate and willing to listen. And I think that's one of the things that we need to do more and more, is learning how to identify maybe some of those kids in our lives that are most isolated and alone, and learning just to be with them, not trying to fix their life, telling them what they're doing wrong, but just to engage in listening and show some mercy and compassion and empathy, so that you can be the person that they can come talk to. And when they share something that might be radical or might really put somebody off, if you just listen and just ask these probing questions. Why do you feel that way? Do you is that the only answer you think to what you feel? And just listen and reflect questions back, and to show that empathetic kind of presence. The other thing is this non-anxious presence. Another thing I was thinking about hospice caregivers is a lot of times when somebody's terminally ill and they're sick and they have these chronic conditions, not everything is an emergency. Throwing up, nausea, vomiting, it's not an emergency. Somebody with certain cancers and they have some bleeding, internal bleeding, it's not an emergency. And you see these hospice caregivers take care of these things, these symptoms, and manage them with not all hyped up and not all rattled, but just calmly and purposefully saying, okay, how can I manage these symptoms? And I've just seen caregivers over and over again, just say, oh, this is happening again. I've got to, okay, we got to take care of this, and we'll just manage the best we can. So that, with that calm empathy, that presence of listening and compassion, now we're calm. We're not always going to be so rattled and in the face. Or so somebody that's facing radicalization, sometimes they're going to want to push buttons to try to see how we respond. Now, we don't want to just say, oh, if you want to go shoot up the school, that's okay. But on the other hand, if somebody just says, I hate everybody at my school, and if we get all rattled and if we're always upset or we're always just on them, and that's a lot of times what happens with these children, and I've noticed this with parents, is they just want their kids to fall in line, and they're tired from work. They've got all these things going on in their own life, and they just don't want their children, they don't want to have to calmly deal with anything. They just want their kids to do right and be right. And so oftentimes they're short with the kids. They're full of anxiousness and it's like full of anxiety because they're dealing with their own issues and they're putting that on their kids, if that makes sense. And so sometimes those kids just need somebody, a grandparent, somebody they can talk to, a neighbor, somebody that's not going to be all rattled, not going to be all intense on life, that they can listen and show empathy and compassion. And then another aspect of hospice caregivers is there's an ambiguity when you're dealing with a terminally ill patient. Are they going to live a week, a month? 4 months, a year? Is this medical condition, this symptom, is this a sign at the end, or is it they're going to stabilize? There's a lot of ambiguity in the care, so the outcome isn't always certain. And hospice caregivers have a way of just being able to deal with that ambiguity and not let it derail them. They just they'll be okay in the uncertainty, be okay in not knowing how things are going to exactly work out. And I think that's another thing with these young people that are facing these pressures to radicalization is, honestly, we don't know how things are going to turn out in their life. We can't make them promises that we can't deliver. And it's better to be a helpful, calm, non-anxious presence in their life, to listen and to be with them, and to just say, I've got to learn how to be comfortable with the ambiguity. I don't know how these kids are going to turn out, but they need me in their life. And I can't let my impatience with them getting their life turning around, getting their act together, saying the right things, doing the right things, if I get impatient for that, wanting predictability, then I'm going to start expressing an anxious presence in their life. I'm going to start getting them all ramped up instead of calmed down, and I'm going to push them away. And what we want to do is we want to slowly pull them away from the radicalizing influences online and pull them to a human connection that will help them begin to make healthier choices for their life and to begin to value human life and community more. And the other thing I noticed too about hospice caregivers is they recognize that they can't do it themselves. And this is really true, where they're glad when the nurse, like a hospice nurse like me, comes over to help, or a hospice aide, or a chaplain, or a social worker. The people that most value the team, the most value neighbors and friends that want to come and help and let them help and be part of a bigger team of care, often do much better as hospice caregivers, because they realize it's just not them by themselves. And usually it's the ones that insist on providing the care by themselves that will often get burned out as hospice caregivers. So where I think about this with this online radicalization is that it takes, I know certain people used to laugh at the saying, it takes a village to raise a child. And they'll say, well, no, it takes parents to raise a child. Well, yes, it takes parents. Parents are the primary caregiver of children. But also it takes parents working together with others for the benefit of their children. In a healthy village, a community setting, there's better outcomes for children. The problem is we don't build these communities of care around our children. They are often very cut off from anything or any meaningful social environment, because the way it is you go to school, and if you're in high school or middle school, you are going to experience all the awkwardness of youth and humiliation and setback and bullying and all that kind of stuff there. And then you come home and you go to your room and you get on your computer, and your parents are all exhausted from the day and they go do their stuff. I was told by a number of families that we tried to raise our kids, at least 3 or 4 times a week when we didn't have ball games or things like that. We would be sitting at home around the table, and my wife, exhausted as she was, would work to get something on the table. And then, as exhausted as I would sit down and work on engaging the kids in conversation about their day, what happened in their day. And as tired as we were, we still made church community an important aspect of our life. As tired as we were, we still went to community events because it was important for us. We felt like it was important for our kids' socialization. And I think what we've done as a society is we've just cut kids off from everything except for the connections that they make online because of a lack of a team approach. And I think that's the other big missing ingredient is finding ways to socially connect our children with other human beings so that they learn to interact and feel the value of being with other human beings. I'll tell you, the older I get, the more I love to have my grandkids around. And as I think about retirement, one of the things I think when I'm retired, then I'll have all the time in the world when my grandkids come over to sit with them, to listen to them, to talk to them, to show value to them. As I think too, in my church life, as I get older, that I'll have more time to invest in young people, to be there for them, to listen, to try to address some of those things that might lead to being radicalized, to use the hospice caregiver skills that I've learned to bring a value into the lives of the kids that I might run across. I encourage you all just to really think about this, because this is really a big challenge we face as a society. We're not going to, online, it's going to be a losing battle if the thought is that we're going to find every source of radicalization online and eradicate it, because I guarantee you, as clever as teenagers are, they're going to find a way to connect with what's most radical and most rebellious. I think rather than trying to cut off the supply of radicalization, there's countries like Russia, China, North Korea, all those countries are going to want to destabilize our country. And they're going to throw whatever out there to bring about the radicalization that can cause violence to destabilize our country. But if we can somehow reduce the demand for it, where our young people are not so isolated, that they're connected, that they have a sense of belonging, that they're finding their meaning, their path in life, that's what they can do, that they're being encouraged to develop their own gifts and abilities, and not told that you go do whatever you want to do. Well, let's help them discover something that they're good at. When we are not so anxious and so on them, and learn how to just be supportive and understand and accept the ambiguities of life when we're with them, and we're working together for the better of our kids, I think we'll get a lower demand for radicalization. I think we'll get a more stable community. And as Christians, I think that's part of what we do when we embody Christ, when we represent Jesus Christ as ambassadors, that what we want to do is quietly go about the work of ministry and ministering to people, so that the vulnerability, I should say, for radicalization is reduced. Maybe not in everyone, but certainly more than who we're influencing now. We've just got to shrink the pool, and I think we'll see less violence if we do that. Anyway, thank you for listening, and may God bless you.